Some stories were never meant to be told. They sat sealed in forgotten files, hidden away in dusty cabinets, buried under the weight of fear and denial. But tonight, we're unlocking them. This is not just a collection. This is a vault of terror. 15 real stories from people who whispered their truths before vanishing from the world's memory. Police reports that went cold. Diaries no one was supposed to read. Recordings that mysteriously ended mid-sentence. We've gathered them all here. And once you press play, there's no turning back. Because each story doesn't just tell you something horrifying. It brings you closer to it, to the thing. In the woods, the presence in the mirror, the voice behind your voicemail. That doesn't belong to anyone you know. So lean in. This is no longer about what you believe. It's about what you'll feel when it's your turn. In the heart of Providence, Rhode Island, where the daytime hum of ripta-buses and bustling businesses fills the air, the night wraps the city in an eerie silence. I was just 15, a scrawny kid with big dreams and a new job flipping burgers at McDonald's right down the street from my house. It was perfect. No need for rides from mom or dad. But perfection has a way of slipping through your fingers when you're young and stubborn. I'd fallen in with a rough crowd at work. Kids who clowned around, disrespected customers, and lived for rebellion. Slowly, their attitude rubbed off on me, turning me into someone I barely recognized. I'd just gotten into a fight with my dad. It was over something dumb. He asked me to take out the trash, and I, puffed up with teenage defiance, decided it wasn't my job anymore. I work now, Dad. I go to school. You take it out. His eyes widened. I'd never talked back like that before. He leaned in, his voice low but sharp. As long as you live here, you help out, take out the trash or leave. I should have just grabbed the bag, but the fire in my chest burned hotter than reason. Fine, I'll leave, I shouted, slamming the door behind me as I stormed into the rainy night. The cold drizzle soaked through my hoodie as I trudged toward McDonald's, hoping to find my friends. But the restaurant was dark, save for the lone maintenance guy mopping the floor. My plan was falling apart, and the rain wasn't letting up. I needed shelter, somewhere to cool off and prove I didn't need my parents. That's when I remembered the overpass bridge a few blocks away. A concrete hideout I'd learned about in school. Safe from storms or worse. With no better options, I headed there, my sneakers squelching with every step, my heart heavy with regret but too proud to turn. Back at the overpass loomed ahead, a hulking shadow against the flickering streetlights. I climbed the muddy hill, slipping twice before reaching the small, dry corner beneath the bridge. It smelled of damp concrete and exhaust, but it was shelter. I curled up, arms wrapped around my knees, the rain's steady patter my only company. I must have fallen asleep, lulled by the rhythm of the storm, until a semi-truck's horn blared, jerking me awake. Disoriented, I blinked into the darkness, my breath catching as I spotted a figure at the bus stop across the street. An old man in a gray suit sat there, still as a statue, facing forward. The clock on my watch read 1:30 a.m., way too late for buses. His presence felt wrong, like a puzzle piece forced into the wrong spot. I stood, brushing dirt off my jeans, and approached, cautiously. As I got closer, he turned his head slowly, his smile warm but unsettlingly knowing. "Everything okay, kid?" he asked, his voice gravelly yet kind. I hesitated, then spilled my story. How I'd run away, how my parents didn't respect me. His smile faded, replaced by a frown that deepened with every word. His eyes, bloodshot and wide, darted to the empty street, as if he saw something lurking in the shadows. Suddenly he grabbed my arm, his bloodshot eyes wide with urgency. "You need to go home now," he hissed, his grip trembling. His voice wasn't just urgent, it was laced with fear, like he knew something I didn't. I yanked free, my heart racing. This wasn't just an old man. There was something otherworldly about him. The way his eyes seemed to pierce through me. The way the air around him felt charged, like a storm about to break. I nodded, backing away, and started walking home, glancing over my shoulder every few steps. But the bus stop was empty. He was gone, as if he'd never been there at all. The walk home was a blur, each step heavier than the last. I couldn't shake the image of his face, those eyes, that desperate plea. I slipped into the house using my spare key, the silence inside heavier than the rain outside. My parents were asleep, oblivious to my absence. Too shaken to face them, I crept to the basement, burrowing under a pile of old clothes. As I lay there, sirens wailed outside, one after another, their red and blue lights flashing through the basement window. Smirking, I thought, they're looking for me. They care. Morning came, and I trudged upstairs, ready for an apology. My mom was at the kitchen table sobbing. She gasped when she saw me, hugging me tighter than ever. "I thought you were dead." Confused, I pulled back. "What?" Her words hit like a freight train. Last night at 1:40 a.m., a drunk driver crashed into the bus stop by McDonald's. It was completely destroyed. My knees buckled. If I'd stayed, I'd be gone. That old man, he'd saved my life. But who was he? No buses ran that late, and he'd vanished without a trace. The next day, I returned to the bus stop, searching for answers. The bench was gone, reduced to twisted metal and shattered glass. There were no footprints, no witnesses. Just a faint smell of ozone, like the air after a lightning strike. I couldn't let it go. At the library, I dug through old newspapers, my hands trembling as I found a clipping from 1973. A man had been killed at that same bus stop, hit by a drunk driver. The grainy photo showed a face eerily like his, dressed in a gray suit, his eyes hauntingly familiar. Was he a ghost? A guardian angel? Or something stranger sent to pull me back from the edge? I'll never know, but that night changed me. I ditched those toxic friends, started listening to my parents, and never looked at that bus stop the same way again. Sometimes the universe sends a warning, through a stranger, a feeling, or a moment you can't explain. You just have to trust it, because if I hadn't, I wouldn't be here telling you this story. The days after that night were a haze. I couldn't stop thinking about the old man, his voice, his eyes, the way he seemed to know what was coming. At school, I barely paid attention, my mind replaying every second of our encounter. My friends noticed the change. "Yo, Chris, you okay?" they'd ask, but I just shrugged. How do you explain something that sounds like it belongs in a horror movie? I started avoiding McDonald's after my shifts, taking the long way home, to steer clear of that bus stop. But the pull to understand what happened was stronger than my fear. One evening I mustered the courage to go back. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the wreckage. The air felt heavy, like it was holding its breath. I stood where the bench used to be, my sneakers crunching on broken glass. That's when I noticed something odd. A faint carving on the concrete pillar nearby. It was weathered, barely legible, but it looked like initials, JH. My heart skipped a beat. The man in the newspaper article, his name was John Harrow. Could it be him? I traced the letters with my finger, feeling a chill that had nothing to do with the autumn breeze. I started asking around town, talking to old-timers who'd lived in Providence forever. Most brushed me off, but one guy, a retired bus driver named Eddie, paused when I mentioned the man in the gray suit. "You're not the first to see him," he said, his voice low. "Folks have been talking about a guy like that for years. Always at that stop, always at night. They say he shows up when something bad's about to happen. Eddie's eyes narrowed. You're lucky, kid. Most don't walk away from that spot. His words stuck with me, gnawing at the edges of my mind. I couldn't sleep without seeing those bloodshot eyes, hearing that desperate "go home." Was he trapped there, doomed to warn others after his own tragic end? Or was he something else? A manifestation of fate, a glitch in reality. I even started wondering if I'd imagined it. But the newspaper clipping, the carving, Eddie's story, they were too real to dismiss. I threw myself into research, scouring library archives and online forums for anything about that bus stop. I found whispers of other incidents, near misses, strange encounters, all tied to that same stretch of road. A woman in 1985 swore a man in a gray suit pulled her back from the curb just before a car sped by. A teenager in 2003 claimed someone grabbed his arm and told him to run, seconds before a gas leak exploded nearby. Each story was different, but the man was always the same. Gray suit, urgent voice, gone without a trace. The more I learned, the more I felt a strange gratitude. Whoever or whatever he was, he'd given me a second chance. I started taking out the trash without complaint, helping Mom with dishes, even talking to Dad about my day. The old me, the one who thought rebellion was cool, was gone. In its place was someone who understood how fragile life could be, how a single moment could change everything. But the story doesn't end there. A year later, I was walking home from a late shift when I passed the rebuilt bus stop. It was pristine, the concrete smooth, the bench gleaming under the streetlight. I stopped, my breath catching as a familiar smell hit me. Ozone, sharp and electric. I turned, half expecting to see him, but the stop was empty. Then from the corner of my eye, I caught a flicker, a shadow moving too fast to be human. My heart pounded, but I didn't run. Instead, I whispered, "Thank you." Maybe it was my imagination. Maybe it was the wind. But I swear I heard a faint reply. "Stay safe, kid." I haven't seen him since, but I carry his warning with me. Life's too short to ignore the signs, the gut feelings, the strangers who seem to know too much, the moments that defy explanation. So next time, you're out late and something feels off, listen. It might just save your life. It was a cold, rainy night in Providence, Rhode Island, where the city's daytime clamor of buses and crowds faded into an eerie hush. The streets, bathed in the flicker of dying streetlights, whispered secrets through the wind slicing across empty alleys. I was 15, a rebellious teen itching to break free. That night, after watching Monday Night Raw, I went downstairs to grab a snack. I opened the fridge and heard my dad's slippers tapping loudly on the tile. "Chris, I've asked you all day to take out the trash. They come tomorrow, so do it now," he said. I rolled my eyes, defiance bubbling up. "I work now and I go to school. You take it out," I snapped, my voice sharp. His eyes widened. I'd never spoken to him like that. He leaned in, voice low but firm. "As long as you live here, you help out. Take out the trash or leave." I called his bluff, my teenage ego overriding sense. "Fine, I'll leave. Don't bother looking for me. I'm done with this stupid house," I shouted, slamming the door behind me. The rain hit like icy needles, soaking my hoodie as I stormed. To the night, Providence felt like a maze of shadows, each corner hiding a judgment for my recklessness. My heart pounded with anger and fear, but I pushed on, refusing to turn back. A faint shuffle, like footsteps, trailed me. I spun around, but the street was empty, the wind mocking my nerves. Seeking shelter, I recalled an overpass nearby, its bus stop a dim refuge in the storm. As I climbed the slick hill, the air thickened, heavy with an unspoken warning. The night, seemed to watch me, its silence louder than the rain. What I'd find at that bus stop would haunt me forever. The bus stop crouched beneath the overpass, a flickering bulb casting a sickly glow over a lone bench. As I approached, I saw him, an old man in a gray suit sitting still, facing forward, like a statue carved from the night itself. He seemed out of time, his presence both comforting and unnerving. I walked closer, and he slowly turned his head, offering a smile. Not creepy, but genuine, peaceful. My shoulders eased. "Mind if I sit?" I asked, voice shaky from the cold. He nodded, gesturing to the bench, his eyes catching the light like polished glass. "Everything okay, kid?" he asked. His voice soft but weighted, as if he saw through me. I spilled my story, the fight with my dad, how I ran away to prove a point. I was stubborn, regretting it now, wishing I'd just taken out the trash. He listened, his face serene, but his hands began to clench the bench, knuckles pale. The air turned heavy, the rain's rhythm fading into a suffocating silence. Suddenly, he grabbed my arm, his grip like iron. His eyes, now bloodshot and wide, pierced mine. "You need to go home now," he screamed, his voice a thunderclap echoing from nowhere. His eyes were terrifying, shaking with fear, as if he saw something I couldn't. The bulb flickered and his shadow twisted, stretching up the wall like a living thing. I yanked free, heart hammering. "I'm going," I gasped. I turned to, run, then glanced back. He was gone. The bench was empty, the light steady as if he'd never existed. My stomach churned. I checked my watch. It was only 1:30 a.m., too early for buses, too late for anyone to be here. Why was he at the bus stop at 1:30 a.m. when buses don't run? The night pulsed with a presence, urging me to flee. I sprinted away, the city's shadows clawing at my heels, his scream ringing in my ears. What did he know that I didn't? I tore through Providence's rain-slicked streets, my breath ragged, the city a labyrinth of looming shadows. Every creak, every distant horn, felt like a warning. I fumbled with my spare key, slipping into the silent house. I crept to the basement, burying myself under bags of clothes to hide. My mind trapped in a loop of that old man's face, his bloodshot eyes, his desperate scream. Why was he there at 1:30 a.m.? Sleep eluded me, his voice haunting every attempt to close my eyes. Morning came, and I emerged, dreading my parents' anger. Instead, I found my mom at the kitchen table, face ashen, tears falling. She gasped, ran to me, hugging me tighter than ever. "I thought you were dead," she whispered. Into my jacket. "Why?" I asked, voice trembling. She said, "Last night at 1:40 a.m., a drunk driver crashed into the bus stop in front of McDonald's. It was completely destroyed." My legs gave out. If that old man hadn't told me to leave, I'd have been sitting there. I'd have been drilled. The truth hit like a sledgehammer, fear, guilt, and gratitude colliding. I hugged my mom, sobbing, apologizing for my stupidity. That moment rewired me. I ditched those toxic friends, found a new crowd, and never argued about the trash again. But the old man's mystery gnawed at me. Days later, in the basement, I found a dusty box of my grandpa's keepsakes. Inside was a 1967 newspaper clipping. "Hero dies saving others in Providence crash." A grainy photo showed a man in a gray suit by that bus stop, his face achingly familiar. He died decades ago, warning people of danger. My blood froze. Was he still there, guarding that cursed spot? I returned to the bus stop, the wreckage gone, but the air thick with memory. "Thank you," I whispered. A breeze stirred, carrying a faint hum like a distant smile. Whoever or whatever you were, thank you for saving my life. I don't know if he was a ghost, fate, or something beyond, but his shadow lingers. Sometimes, passing that overpass, I glimpse gray-suited figure watching, waiting to save another soul. I grew up in a town in the UK that was pretty big for a town. We had nearly 100,000 residents. So, yeah, pretty big. Where I used to live was in like an estate full of houses. Well, I had a best friend at the time who lived about 20 to 25-minute walk from my house, but in order to get there, you had to walk through a wooded area that led to a big lake. You would walk around it to get to near his house. By day, the town buzzed with life. Market stalls, honking cars, kids chasing soccer balls. But at night it fell silent as if the world held its breath. My name's Ethan, and at 15 I was reckless, chasing thrills with my buddy Jake, always looking for the next adventure. That lake, though, it was different. Nestled beyond a wooded area, its waters were too still, reflecting gnarled trees like a warped mirror. Locals called it cursed, whispering of lights dancing on its surface, of voices crying out when no one was near. I laughed it off, chalking it up to old wives' tales. But then, the tragedy hit. We noticed a lot of police presences in the area, near the woods. Plus, there was a police helicopter up in the air. To being curious as we were, we followed the police to the woodlands that separated our houses. We went through the woods to the lake with the police, and ambulance workers were amongst many bystanders at this point. But we got there and started asking people what had happened. We were told that a young boy around the age of 7 had drowned in the lake near the path where everybody was gathering. His name was Oliver, a tiny kid with a gap-toothed smile, swallowed by the lake's depths while his friend ran screaming for help. Over the next couple of days, police were trolling the lake looking for the child who they knew was there because his friend ran for help when he fell in and couldn't get out. And 2 or 3 days after he slipped into the lake, authorities found the young boy's body, which was big news in my town no later than 24 hours after the boy was found. The local council installed a black metal bench on the footpath near where he died, with a little plaque commemorating his life. The bench, cold and unyielding, bore a plaque, Oliver, Forever 7. It was meant to honor him, but it felt like a scar on the town, a reminder of what the lake had taken. Kids started daring each other to touch it at night, claiming they felt whispers in the dark. I didn't believe in ghosts, but that bench, it changed everything. It was a chilly November night, the kind where the air bites your skin and the stars hide behind a shroud of clouds. Jake and I were headed to his place, cutting through the wooded area to save time. The path was narrow, lined with twisted trees that seemed to whisper secrets in the dark. Our sneakers crunched on fallen leaves, the only sound in a world too quiet, too still. I tried to keep things light, tossing jokes at Jake, but my gut churned with unease, like we were being watched. The lake loomed ahead, its surface a black mirror under a sliver of moon. We'd heard the stories, how Oliver's spirit haunted the path, how the lake swallowed more than just him. Jake rolled his eyes at the rumors, but I wasn't so sure. The air grew heavier as we neared the water, a metallic tang lingering, like blood on the wind. When we started walking down the side of the lake, down the path towards where the kid had drowned, and the bench was, we were just talking nonsense as high teens did when I noticed that when the bench got into sight, that there was a man sat on the bench now. I was a bit freaked out by this, but I didn't say anything yet. It was 11 p.m. near the woods in the dark, and it was creepy to say the least. But when I got a little bit closer, I noticed that I could see that the man was wearing I don't know, something like a priest perhaps, sort of like black jacket, white collar. His silhouette was stark against the lake's shimmer, head bowed as if in prayer. The bench creaked faintly, a rhythmic sound that sent chills down my spine. "Yo, who's that?" Jake whispered, his voice tight. I didn't answer, my eyes locked on the figure. His white collar gleamed, but his face was hidden, too pale, too still. Every instinct screamed to run, but my legs felt rooted. The lake was silent, no crickets, no breeze, just an oppressive quiet that pressed against us. Was he mourning Oliver? Or was he something else? Something the lake had summoned? We inched closer, the creaking growing louder, more deliberate, like a warning. My heart hammered as we crept toward the man sat on the bench. The air was thick, cold, like wading through a fog that clung to your bones. The creaking stopped, leaving only the faint lapping of the lake, each wave a whisper of something watching. After noticing this priest, I just sort of watched him sit there, and as I got closer and closer, I didn't say anything to my friend. It was right next to me, but we collectively stopped talking once he noticed the man too as we got closer. It was more obvious that he was a priest, and then once we got within about 5 meters of him, he was just all of a sudden gone, like gone. I felt like I blinked and had just disappeared. I stumbled back, my breath catching. The bench was empty, the air still, as if he'd been erased from existence. No footsteps, no rustle of leaves, nothing. I turned to my friend, who was just as confused and spooked as I was. It seemed I asked if he had just seen that man sat on the bench. I didn't want to say what type of man, because the way that he was dressed was very obvious as to what type of man he was. But as I asked him, "Did you see that man?" he said, "Yeah, the guy dressed like a priest." My blood ran cold. Jake's eyes were wide, his face pale as he gripped my arm. "That wasn't right, man," he choked out. We bolted, sprinting down the path, the lake's dark waters glinting like eyes. The woods closed in, branches snagging, our clothes like claws. Every shadow seemed alive, every rustle a threat. I kept glancing back, half expecting that priest, or whatever he was, to be trailing us, his white collar glowing in the dark. My lungs burned, but fear drove us forward, past the lake, through the woods, until we slammed into Jake's house, locking the door behind us. "What was that?" I gasped, collapsing against the wall. Jake shook his head, his voice barely a whisper. "Not human, not even close." The image of that empty bench burned in my mind, a warning I couldn't shake. That night by the lake changed me. Weeks passed, but the image of the man, his white collar stark against the dark, his sudden absence haunted my dreams. I'd wake in a cold sweat, checking my windows for a shadow that wasn't there. Jake wasn't the same either. His cocky grin was gone, replaced by a quiet unease. We avoided the wooded area, taking longer routes to his house, but the lake's pull lingered, like a voice whispering my name in the dark. The town tried to forget, but the bench stood as a silent reminder of Oliver's fate. New rumors spread, footsteps echoing at midnight, a chill near the lake that no coat could warm. Some swore they saw a figure in black, sitting where no one should be. I wondered if Oliver's spirit was trapped, or if something older, something darker, had claimed the lake long before. That priest, who or what was he? A guardian watching over Oliver's grave? A ghost tied to the water's curse? Or something we'll never understand? That night taught me to trust my gut, to heed the warnings my instincts screamed. The world felt bigger, scarier, like shadows hid truths we weren't meant to see. The bench wasn't just a memorial, it was a marker, a line between our world and whatever lurks beyond. If you're ever in a quiet English town near a big lake framed by a wooded area, think twice before walking that path at night. You might see a man on a bench, his collar white as bone, his presence a warning. And if you do, run. Some things aren't meant to be seen. Have you ever faced something you can't explain? A figure that vanished? A chill that didn't belong? Share your story below, because the truth is out there, waiting in the shadows. And trust me, you don't want to meet it alone. A house so far out in the sticks, the only sound at night is the wind whispering through the cornfields. That's where I was, in the middle of nowhere, Kentucky, on a day that felt too quiet, like the world was holding its breath. I was off, work, sprawled on the couch, the kind of lazy afternoon where you don't expect anything to happen. My fiancé was out, but his 2 cars sat in the driveway, a silent hint that I wasn't alone. That small detail, that stroke of dumb luck, might have been what kept me safe. It started with a knock, sharp, urgent, like someone was trying to punch through the door. Then the doorbell rang, over and over. A relentless chime that set my nerves on edge. There were several knocks and the person kept ringing the doorbells. I wasn't expecting anyone, and out here, visitors don't just show up. My heart kicked into gear, a slow dread creeping up my spine. I hesitated, but curiosity won out. I crept to the door, my hand trembling as I turned the knob, keeping the chain locked. Through the crack, I saw him. A man, mid-30s, standing at the edge of my driveway. His car parked half on the road like he was ready to peel out. A mid-30s man seemingly having Down syndrome had parked at the very edge of the driveway on the road, which alarmed me. His eyes were too wide, his movements jerky, like he was wired on something more than nerves. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He didn't answer, just stared, his gaze drilling into me like he was searching for something. Then, he started talking, his words tumbling out in a rush. He asked me questions about knowing anyone who used to live here, his voice high and unsteady like he was chasing a ghost. I kept my answers short, my grip tightening on the door. "No," I said, but he wasn't listening. He stepped closer, gravel crunching under his shoes, and his questions turned personal. He asked if I was in high school and how old am I and if I was home alone. Each word felt like a probe, testing my defenses, and I realized this wasn't just a weird encounter. This was something dangerous. My pulse was a drumbeat in my ears, each question from this stranger slicing deeper into my calm. My fiancé has 2 cars, so thankfully it looked like I was not alone, and that seemed to hold him back, his eyes flickering to the driveway like he was weighing his odds. But he didn't stop. He took another step, closer now, close enough that I could see the sweat on his brow, the way his hands twitched like they were itching to grab something. I kept it short and said no, but he pressed harder, his voice dropping to a desperate whisper. "The people who lived here, they had a son. You sure you don't know them?" That's when it clicked. This wasn't random. He knew this house, its history, its ghosts. My mind scrambled, pulling up fragments of conversations with neighbors, whispers about the darkness that clung to this place. They told me that there was an elderly couple with a son with a disability, and the couple had apparently hung themselves in the house. The words hit like a punch, cold and heavy, raising goosebumps on my arms. Was this man their son? Was he back to reclaim something lost, or to settle a score? I didn't have time to process it. His eyes locked on mine, wild and unblinking, and he leaned in, his voice barely audible. "I need to know if you're alone." My stomach dropped. This wasn't curiosity, it was a threat. I slammed the door, the chain rattling as I fumbled with the lock, my hands shaking so bad I could barely turn the bolt. At that, he seemed sort of scared off and ran to his car and sped off, but not before I caught a glimpse of something in his, and a photograph, old and worn, clutched like it was his only anchor to reality. I stood there, back against the door, the roar of his engine fading into the night. My heart was still racing, my mind spinning with questions. Why this house? Why me? I grabbed my phone, dialed my neighbor, my voice trembling as I asked about the previous owners. Their answer turned my fear into something deeper, something that sank into my bones. The son, his name was Daniel, hadn't just disappeared after his parents' deaths. He'd been seen over the years wandering these back roads, muttering about a promise he had to keep. Some said he was harmless, lost in grief. Others said he was dangerous, driven by something darker, something tied to this house. And that photograph? They didn't know what it was, but the way he'd held it, the way he'd looked at me made me think it wasn't just a memory. It was a mission. The days after were a haze of fear, every creak in the floorboards, every rustle in the yard. Feeling like him, watching, waiting, I couldn't shake the image of that photograph. Its edges frayed like it had been carried through a lifetime of pain. What was in it? His parents? This house? Or something that tied him to me in ways I couldn't fathom? I stopped sleeping, kept the lights on, my fiance's old baseball bat by the bed. I went over to my neighbors and inquired about the previous owners and the man. I'm honestly too scared to even answer my front door again. And this house, once a home, now felt like a trap. I had to know more. The neighbors were cagey, their voices low like they were afraid the walls were listening. They confirmed the rumors. The couple's deaths were no accident, a grim pact made in the attic, their son left behind to carry the weight. Daniel, they said, had unraveled after that, drifting in and out of institutions, always circling back to this house. Some swore he was searching for forgiveness. Others whispered he was chasing something darker, something left behind in these walls. Each story chipped away at my sanity, but I kept digging, scouring old records, piecing together a puzzle I wasn't sure I wanted to solve. Then, one sleepless night, I found it. A loose floorboard in the living room, hiding a small, yellowed envelope. Inside was a letter, its ink faded, but its words sharp. "Daniel, we tried to shield you, but we failed. Leave this house, it's cursed." The signature was illegible, but the fear in those lines was alive, pulsing. Had he found this? Was this why he'd come, driven by a warning he couldn't heed? I took the letter to the sheriff, but their skeptical glances told me they'd heard it all before. They promised to patrol, but I knew Daniel wasn't the kind to be caught. Weeks later, it happened again. I was in the kitchen, the world outside cloaked in dusk, when a single knock echoed through the house. My breath caught, my hand closing, around a knife as I crept to the window. There he was at the edge of the driveway, clutching that photograph, his eyes burning with purpose. But he wasn't alone. A woman, older, her face shadowed by a scarf, stood beside him, pointing at the house, her whispers urgent. Who was she, his mother's ghost, an accomplice? I ducked, heart pounding, and when I looked again, they were gone, swallowed by the night. I'm packing now, desperate to leave this cursed place, but the fear follows me. That letter, those eyes, that photograph, they're a chain I can't break. I mean, what was that guy's deal, and why did he run away seemingly scared? When he found out that my husband was apparently home, I may never know. But this house holds secrets, and they're not done with me. If you ever feel that prick of dread, that whisper telling you something's wrong, listen. It might save your life. And if you live in a house with a past, dig deep, because some truths don't stay buried. I was barely 20, fresh out of college for spring break, itching for a night out with my two best friends, Jake and Sarah. We were crashing at employee housing deep in the Appalachians, a speck of civilization surrounded by endless pines and pitch black. Here, our job, guiding tourists through nature trails by day. By night, we were just kids craving a break. We decided to hit a dive bar about 25 minutes away, a gritty joint called Rusty's that promised cold beer and a jukebox stuck in the 80s. The plan was simple: drive, drink, dance, and forget the world for a few hours. The highway was a one-lane, stretch in each direction, darker than sin, with only the occasional flicker of a passing car's headlights to break the void. No streetlights, no signs, just the hum of our old pickup and the crunch of gravel under the tires. Jake was behind the wheel, Sarah riding shotgun, me sprawled in the back, half listening to their banter about who'd outdance who. The air was thick with the scent of pine and anticipation. But as we rounded a bend, something shifted. A prickle crawled up my spine, like the night itself was watching us. I brushed it off, probably just the isolation playing tricks, or so I thought. We were maybe halfway to Rusty's when a pair of oncoming cars flashed their high beams, sharp and urgent. Jake eased off the gas, muttering about rude drivers. That's when we saw him, a guy in the opposite lane right in the middle, dancing like he was at a rave no one else was invited to. No reflective vest, no flashlight, just a shadow twirling under our headlights, arms flailing, feet shuffling in some chaotic rhythm. It was pitch black, no illumination on this stretch of highway, so we didn't even see him till our lights hit him. My heart skipped. Who dances in the middle of a road at midnight? Sarah leaned forward, squinting. Is he okay? She whispered, her voice tight. I didn't answer. Something about the way he moved, jerky, almost mechanical, felt wrong. He was walking along the curve of the road, in the opposite direction, where oncoming cars wouldn't see him until they were right on top of him. I pictured tires screeching, metal crunching. "Jake, slow down," I said, my voice barely steady. He did, but his knuckles were white on the wheel. The guy didn't even glance our way, lost in his bizarre performance. Another car roared past, swerving at the last second, horn blaring. He didn't flinch. It was like he was daring the night to swallow him whole. I'd never been more certain of anything in my life. This guy was gonna get hit. My stomach churned as I imagined the inevitable. "We gotta do something," I said, my voice shaking. Sarah nodded, her eyes wide. We flashed our lights at the oncoming cars, praying they'd see him in time. Jake pulled over to a patch of gravel, the tires crunching loudly in the silence. "What now?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. We rolled down the windows, the cold mountain air biting our skin, and braced ourselves for the sound of a crash that never came. The night was eerily still. No screech, no thud, just the distant hum of engines fading away. We exchanged glances, a silent agreement to turn back. Jake swung the truck around, and there he was, still in the middle of the road. But now he wasn't dancing. He was standing completely still, staring right at us. His eyes glinted in the headlights, unblinking, like a predator sizing up prey. My blood ran cold. "Drive," I hissed, but Jake was frozen, locked in that stare. The man's jittery energy was gone, replaced by something far worse: intent. Then, without warning, he lunged toward us, his silhouette growing larger in the headlights. Sarah screamed and I yelled, "He could have a gun, Jake, go!" Jake slammed the gas, the truck lurching forward as the man's hand grazed the door handle, a sickening scrape echoing in my ears. We sped off into the night, my heart pounding so hard I thought it had burst. I dialed 911, my fingers fumbling, reporting a man endangering himself and others on Route 17. The operator's calm voice did little to ease the dread pooling in my gut. We didn't stop until we reached Rusty's, the neon sign a feeble beacon. In the darkness, the bar was half empty, the jukebox blaring some forgotten country tune. We sat in a corner booth, too shaken to order drinks, replaying the encounter in hushed tones. Who was he? A drifter? A ghost? Something worse? On the drive back, there was no sign of him. No police, no commotion, just the same empty road. It was like he'd vanished into the Appalachian mist. The next day I checked local news, half expecting a report about a hit and run or an arrest. Nothing. It was as if the night had swallowed him whole. That 6-minute encounter changed me. I still drive that highway sometimes, but now I grip the wheel a little tighter, scanning the shadows for a figure that shouldn't be there. What haunts me most isn't just his face or the way he moved. It's the question that lingers, like a splinter in my mind. What did he want, and why us? Some nights I swear I still hear that scrape against the door, a reminder that some mysteries don't resolve. They just follow you home. The dream came first, vivid and wrong. I was standing in a desert, sand swirling around me, a voice whispering words I couldn't grasp. I was 14, a kid named Malik, living in a quiet suburb outside Chicago, where the most exciting thing was sneaking extra screen time after bedtime. But that dream, it felt like a warning or maybe an invitation. I'd been obsessed with ghost shows lately, binging episodes about demons and spirits while my parents thought I was doing homework. Jinns, the shows called them, beings of smokeless fire, neither angel nor demon, lurking just beyond our world. I didn't believe it, not really, but I was curious. Too curious. My room was my sanctuary, cluttered with comic books and half-finished model kits. But that night it felt different, like the walls were watching. I'd been reading about jinns online, stories of wishes gone wrong, of shadows that spoke. My friends laughed when I brought it up, calling it kid stuff. But alone, in the dark, I wondered, what if it was real? What if I could see one? That's when I did something stupid. I set up a prayer, not to worship, but to call out to the unknown. If jinns are real, I whispered, let me see one. The words felt heavy, like they carried a weight I didn't understand. I lit a candle for no reason other than it felt right, its flame flickering like it was nervous. When I blew it out, the air shifted, a faint chill, a hum in my ears, like the room was holding its breath. I laughed it off, crawling into bed, telling myself it was just my imagination. But deep down, I knew I'd opened a door I wasn't ready to step through. The next few nights were off. I'd be brushing my teeth, and the mirror would fog up for no reason, the steam curling into shapes that almost looked like faces. My phone would glitch, playing static instead of my usual playlist. I told myself it was nothing, but the feeling of being watched clung to me like a shadow. I wasn't in bed yet, just sorting out my room when I heard it. A woman's voice, soft and soothing, saying, "Go to sleep, sweetheart." It was clear as day, like she was standing behind me. I spun around, heart in my throat, but the room was empty. My parents were downstairs and my sister was at a sleepover. No one else was home. I checked the windows, the closet, even under the bed. Nothing. But the air felt thick, like I was breathing through a mask. The next morning I was getting ready for school, pulling on my sneakers, when it happened again. Something leaned close to my ear, speaking in a deep, guttural voice, words in a language I'd never heard. It wasn't human. No one's voice could sound like that, like gravel grinding under a wheel. I froze, my hands shaking, unable to move until the sound faded. I ran to my mom, babbling about what I'd heard, but she just hugged me and said I was stressed. "Too much TV," she said, ruffling my hair. I wanted to believe her, but the air in my room felt heavier now, like something was waiting for me to slip up. At school, I couldn't focus. My best friend Jamal noticed. "You look like you saw a ghost," he joked. I forced a laugh, but my eyes kept darting to the corners, expecting something to step out. The incidents didn't stop. I felt it more when I was alone, a presence lurking just out of sight. At night, my room felt like a cage, the darkness pressing against me. I started sleeping with the light on, but it didn't help. Objects began to move, a pencil rolling off my desk, a book falling open to a random page. One night, I woke to find my window cracked open, though I swore I'd locked it. I started praying before bed, not the reckless prayer from before, but a plea for protection. It didn't stop the feeling that something was circling me, testing me. One evening, I was in the kitchen grabbing a glass of water, the house quiet except for the hum of the fridge. The light flickered, just for a second, and I froze. When I looked toward the living room, I saw it. A tall, dark figure, darker than the room walking through. It was impossibly tall, its head brushing the ceiling, wearing a long coat and a top hat that seemed to absorb the light. Its face was a void, no features, just an empty black. It moved with purpose, gliding toward the wall, then vanished, like it had stepped through reality itself. I stumbled back, knocking over the glass, the shatter echoing in the silence. My heart screamed run, but my legs wouldn't move. That's when I noticed something on the floor, a small tarnished coin, etched with symbols I didn't recognize. It hadn't been there before. I grabbed the coin, my hands trembling, and shoved it into my pocket. The house felt alive now, every creak and shadow a threat. I stopped sleeping in my room, camping out on the couch instead. But the presence followed me. At night, I'd hear whispers, not words, but a low hum, like a chant just out of reach. My parents didn't believe me, but my grandma, who lived with us, gave me a strange look when I mentioned the coin. "Show me," she said, her voice sharp. When I handed it to her, her face paled. "Where did you get this?" she whispered. She pulled me aside, away from my parents, and told me a story I'd never heard, about my great-grandfather, a man who dabbled in forbidden rituals, seeking power from beings he couldn't control. He disappeared one night, leaving behind only a coin like mine. "Some doors, Malik," she said, "aren't meant to be opened." I was terrified, but I couldn't stop digging. I researched jinns, finding stories of tricksters and guardians, of beings who could be kind or cruel depending on how you approached them. Was this jinn angry because I'd called it? Or was it tied to my great-grandfather's mistakes? I started noticing patterns. The coin grew warm in my pocket when I was alone, and the air would hum, like it was trying to speak. I tried to stay strong, praying every night, but the presence grew bolder. One night I woke to find my bedroom door ajar, though I'd locked it. Footprints, faint and ashy, led from my bed to the window. I couldn't take it anymore. I asked God to take it away, and it stopped, just as suddenly as it started. The voices, the figure, the heavy air, they were gone. I buried the coin in the backyard under a tree, praying it would stay gone. The house felt normal again, but I wasn't the same. I stopped watching ghost shows, stopped chasing thrills. My grandma's words echoed in my head. Some doors aren't meant to be opened. But sometimes, late at night, I feel a chill, like something's still out there, watching, waiting for me to slip up again. Be careful what you wish for, because the unseen is always listening, and it doesn't always let go. The old library at Westfield Middle School was a forgotten relic, its shelves sagging under dusty tomes no one touched. I was 13, a quiet kid named Ethan, always drawn to the strange and unexplained. One rainy afternoon, while hiding from a boring study hall, I stumbled across a leather-bound book tucked behind a radiator, its cover etched with symbols that seemed to pulse under my fingertips. Jinns. Spirits of the Unseen, read the faded title. My heart raced. Stories of jinns had always fascinated me. Shadowy beings from another realm. Neither good nor evil, but always watching. I smuggled the book home, devouring its pages under my flashlight, each word igniting a reckless curiosity. That night in my cramped bedroom, I did something foolish. I set up a prayer, my voice trembling, and called out, "God, if jinns are real, let me have an experience of my own." I didn't expect an answer, but the air shifted, heavy with a presence I couldn't name. The house creaked, as if waking from a long sleep. I laughed it off, blaming my imagination. But deep down, I knew I'd opened a door I couldn't close. The next few nights were quiet, but the book's warnings echoed. Jinns hear those who call them, and they never forget. Then it began. A faint hum, like distant whispers, seeped through the walls. My dog Max growled at empty corners, his hackles raised. I tried to ignore it, but the air felt charged, like a storm about to break. Something was coming, and I had invited it. A week after my prayer, the house felt alive with secrets. One night, as I sorted clothes in my room, a soft, soothing voice like a woman's whispered, "Go to sleep, sweetheart." Clear as day, right behind me. I spun around, heart pounding, but the room was empty, the door locked. The accent was strange, one I'd never heard before. I brushed it off as exhaustion, but sleep brought no peace. The next morning, as I pulled on my jeans, something pressed against my left ear, speaking in a deep, guttural voice no human could make, in a language I didn't know. My body froze, terror rooting me to the spot. The voice faded, but its echo lingered like a scar in the air. The disturbances grew bolder. One night, as I listened to holy texts through earphones, the sound muffled, and that guttural voice returned, drowning out my music, speaking its alien tongue. I ripped off the earphones, shaking, the room unnaturally still. When I prayed aloud, a high-pitched scream tore through the air. "No!" The house trembled, a low rumble shaking the floorboards. Max whimpered, staring at the hallway, where shadows seemed to writhe. Then came the night that broke me. I was sneaking a glass of water from the kitchen, the clock ticking past midnight. The living room door stood open, the kitchen's light casting a faint glow. As I glanced toward the living room, I saw it. A tall, dark figure, darker than the room, wearing a top hat and a long coat, walking through the living room toward a wall. It moved with purpose, its form swallowing the light around it. It reached the wall and vanished as if stepping through an invisible door. My glass slipped, shattering on the floor. The figure's presence lingered, a weight pressing on my chest, as if it knew I'd seen it. The weeks that followed were a blur of fear. Every creak, every shadow felt like a threat. I stopped sleeping in my room, camping out on the couch, but the presence followed. One night, as I drifted off, I woke to a hand wrapping around my ankle, each finger deliberate, cold as ice. I bolted upright, kicking at the darkness, but no one was there. The room empty. My scream woke Max, who barked at nothing, his eyes fixed on the ceiling. I clutched my holy texts, praying until dawn, but the house felt like a cage, its walls closing in. Desperate, I turned to the book that started it all. Its final pages warned of jinns binding to those who summon them, only broken by fervent prayer. That night, I knelt in my room, voice shaking, and begged God to remove this thing. The air grew still, the presence retreating like a tide. The disturbances stopped, but the scars remained. I'll never forget those months, the terror of something watching, waiting. I burned the book, its ashes a vow never to tempt the unseen again. But the story didn't end there. Months later, while helping my mom clean the attic, I found a rusted tin box, its lid etched with the same symbols as the book. Inside was a faded sketch. A tall figure in a top hat, its face a void, standing in our living room. A note in my great-grandfather's handwriting read, "It came in 1923. Don't call it back." My blood ran cold. Had this thing haunted my family before? I buried the box in the backyard, praying it would stay gone. Yet sometimes at night I hear a faint tap on the window, and I wonder if it's truly over. This happened back in 2013 when I was only 12 years old. I was home alone when this happened. I was sitting on my computer and we had one of these old phones that had a cord attached to it at the time. Now I grew up watching horror movies with my older brothers, and I hated being home alone at the time, so whenever I was home alone, I would open every door in the house to get the sunlight in and feel less scared that way. My name's Lucas, and at 12, I was a skinny kid with a wild imagination, fueled by too many late-night horror flicks. Our house was old, creaky, with floorboards that groaned like they had stories to tell. That afternoon, I was alone. The kind of alone where the silence feels like a weight pressing down on you. The living room was dim, lit only by the flickering glow of my computer screen and slivers of sunlight sneaking through the open doors. I'd propped every door wide, front, back, even the creaky basement one, to let in the light, chasing away the shadows that seemed to creep closer when no one else was home. The old rotary phone sat on the desk, its coiled cord tangled like a snake. It was a relic, something my mom refused to replace, and it always felt out of place, like it belonged to a ghost story. Outside, the neighborhood was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you jump at the slightest sound. A branch tapping the window, a car rumbling in the distance. I tried to focus on my game. The clicks of my mouse a small comfort, but the house had other plans. Every so often a draft would slither through, rustling the curtains, and I'd glance over my shoulder, half expecting to see someone standing there. My brothers, Matt and Ryan, were at soccer practice, and Mom was at work, not due back for hours. I was used to being alone, but today felt different. Like the air was charged with something I couldn't name. Maybe it was the horror movies, the ones where the phone rings and the voice on the other end isn't human. I shook it off, telling myself I was being paranoid. But deep down, I knew something was off. The house wasn't just empty. It was waiting. The clock on my computer read 3:17 p.m. Too early for Mom to call. Too quiet for the world to feel right. I was deep in my game, the virtual world a shield against the house's eerie stillness, when a shadow flickered across the screen. I froze, glancing at the open front door, but nothing was there. Just the empty porch and a sway of trees in the breeze. My heart thudded, a warning I ignored, chalking it up to nerves. But the house felt wrong, like it was holding its breath, waiting for something to break the silence. Then it happened. I've been sitting on the computer playing League of Legends when I suddenly get a phone call from my mom. I thought that it was a bit weird because she never calls me this early, so I decided to answer it. The old rotary phone shrieked, its bell cutting through the quiet like a scream. I stared at it, my hands hovering over the keyboard. Mom never called during work hours. She'd text if anything. The phone rang again, insistent, each chime tightening the knot in my stomach. I reached for the receiver, my fingers trembling, telling myself it was nothing. Maybe she forgot something. Maybe it was urgent. But deep down, I knew better. I lifted the phone to my ear, the plastic cold against my skin. "Hello?" I said, my voice barely a whisper. Static crackled on the line, faint but alive, like distant whispers in a storm. I waited, expecting Mom's familiar voice, her usual, "Lucas, you okay?" But there was nothing, just the static, growing louder, more jagged, like it was trying to speak. My breath hitched, the room suddenly colder, the sunlight dimmer. I glanced at the open doors, half expecting a figure to step through, but the house was empty. Or was it? The static shifted, and then I heard it. A sound that turned my blood to ice. A whisper that wasn't human, clawing its way through the line. What happened next is something that I'll never be able to understand. I answered the phone call and heard my mom whispering my name in a very low voice. I freaked out for a few seconds. I could feel my heart pounding. I started saying "Mom," but there was no reply. The voice wasn't Mom's, not really. It was her voice, but twisted, like it had been dragged through something dark and cold. "Lucas," it hissed, low and guttural, each syllable stretching into a rasp that clawed at my mind. I gripped the phone, my knuckles white, shouting, "Mom, Mom, is that you?" But the line stayed silent, the static gone, replaced by an oppressive void. I slammed the receiver down, my chest heaving, tears stinging my eyes. The room spun, the open doors now mocking me, letting in nothing but shadows. So after a few seconds, I just ended the call and I sat down crying while playing until my mom got home from work. I tried to focus on my game, but the screen blurred, my hands shaking too hard to click. Every creak of the house felt like a step, every flicker of light a presence. I ran to the front door, checking the porch, empty. The basement door still open, but the darkness below seemed deeper, alive. I grabbed a kitchen knife, clutching it like a lifeline, and sat by the phone, staring at it, daring it to ring again. Hours crawled by, each second a battle against the fear choking me. When I heard Mom's car in the driveway, I bolted to her, the knife clattering to the floor. She could see right away that I was anxious and asked me if something had happened. I told her, "Why would you prank me by calling me and whispering my name like that?" And then she said, "I never called you." Her face paled as she checked her phone. No outgoing calls, no trace of the nightmare I'd heard. "Lucas, I was in a meeting all afternoon," she said, her voice trembling. I collapsed into her arms, sobbing, the memory of that whisper searing my brain. Something had used her voice, something that knew my name, and it was still out there waiting. That call changed everything. Days later, I couldn't shake the sound of that whisper. My mom whispering my name in a very low voice, like it was burned into my soul. I stopped staying home alone, begging Matt or Ryan to stick around, their teasing no match for the terror I felt. The old phone sat untouched, its cord a coiled threat I refused to approach. To this day, she swears that she never called me, but she remembers me being freaked out. My only theory is that it's either something supernatural, or it was potentially one of my brothers pranking me, even though they all told me that they didn't. And none of us knew how to spoof a phone call back then, so to be honest, I'm not so sure. But Matt and Ryan swore they didn't touch the phone, and in 2013, faking a call like that was beyond us. Mom started locking the doors at night, her eyes lingering on the phone like it might betray us. I noticed things after that. Flickers. The corner of my eye. A chill in the living room that no heater could warm. Once, late at night, I heard a faint hum from the phone, like it was alive. But when I checked, it was unplugged. Was it a ghost? Mimicking Mom's voice? A prank from something darker, something that knew how to twist my fears? Or was the house itself alive? Its walls hiding secrets older than us? I'll never know, but I know what I heard. And it wasn't human. That day taught me the world isn't as safe as it seems, that some voices don't belong to the living. If you're ever alone, and an old phone rings with a name you trust, Think twice before you answer. It might not be who you think, and some calls you can't hang up. Have you ever heard a voice that chilled your blood? A sound that didn't belong? Share your story below, because the truth is out there whispering in the dark. And trust me, you don't want to hear it alone. Some memories stick with you. Not because they're sweet, but because they're sharp. Like a blade that cuts deeper every time you think about them. That's what this story is for me. A moment from my childhood that still sends shivers down my spine. It was January 1902. And I was just 6 years old, a scrawny kid named Eli, bundled up in wool and dreams of adventure. I lived near Chesterfield, Idaho, a speck of a town where winter turned the world into a glittering frozen playground. That day, the sun was out, painting the snow gold, and me, my older brother Caleb, and a gang of kids from nearby farms decided to make the most of it. We hitched sleighs to our horses and headed down to the river to ice skate, our laughter echoing through the frost-bitten air. The river was our kingdom, a wide, shallow stretch where the ice was thick and the water barely reached your knees. If you fell through, the best spot to skate was next to the Googe's ranch, and we were all buzzing with excitement, showing off our shiny new Christmas skates. There were 8 of us. Me, Caleb, the 3 Robinson kids, Tommy Bayer, and the Gooch twins, racing across the ice, our blades carving stories into the frozen surface. But something felt off, even then. The air was too still, the woods too quiet, like the forest was watching us. I ignored it, caught up in the thrill, but looking back, I wonder if that was the moment it saw us, whatever it was. As we spun and slid, a strange sound broke through our chatter, a low, rumbling growl from the willows on the opposite bank. We froze, eyes darting to the shadows. Was it a bear? A wolf? The older kids laughed it off, but I clung to Caleb's sleeve, my heart thumping. Then, silence again, heavy and wrong. We went back to skating, but the joy was gone, replaced by a creeping unease. Little did we know that growl was just the beginning. A warning we should have heeded before the world turned upside down. We were lost in our game, chasing each other across the ice, when it happened. A loud scream came from a willow bush on the riverbank opposite us, sharp and guttural like nothing human. We stopped dead, hearts pounding as the bushes parted and a giant man covered head to toe in thick black fur came lumbering out. He was massive, towering over the willows, carrying a large tree branch that looked like a club in his massive hands. His eyes, red burning, locked on us, and he let out a roar that shook the air. He was screaming in a rage at the kids, and we scattered, our skates slipping as we bolted for the sleighs. We fled towards the sleighs, scrambling up the riverbank, but I was the youngest, my legs too short, my skates too heavy. I couldn't get a good foothold because of the skates and also fell backwards towards the ice. The giant was closing in, his footsteps cracking the frozen ground, his branch swinging like a pendulum. I screamed for Caleb, my voice lost in the chaos, certain this was it, that this creature was going to eat me. But then, a miracle. As the giant was midway across the river, the ice finally gave way, his shins sinking into the frigid water. He roared, slowed but not stopped, thrashing to free himself. This gave my grandpa's brother just enough time to jump down and cut the laces off of my skates. Caleb yanked me up and we abandoned the skates, clawing our way to the sleigh. As we piled in, I looked back. The giant man was cresting the riverbank, still bellowing, swinging his tree branch. But he didn't chase us further, just stood there, a hulking shadow against the snow, his red eyes searing into my soul. We whipped the horses, the sleigh lurching forward, and didn't stop until we reached the Gooch Ranch. My chest heaved, tears freezing on my cheeks as we spilled out our story to Old Man Gooch. He didn't laugh, didn't doubt us. His face went pale, and he muttered something about the old stories his grandfather told. Tales of something ancient, something that hunted in these woods. The other kids were shaken, but I was wrecked, replaying those eyes, that roar, knowing I'd stared into the face of something no child should ever see. Word of our encounter spread like wildfire through the tiny farming community, and by dusk, a posse was formed to hunt down the beast. They followed the trail where we'd skated, and what they found turned their blood cold. There were found footprints almost 2 feet in length, deep and wide, leading from the riverbank into the woods. My skates, left behind in our panic, were there too, but they had both been bent in half like horseshoes, as if crushed by an impossible force. The tracks headed west into the nearby mountains, and the posse chased them as far as they could, but deep snow prevented their travel any further. The creature was never sighted in that area again, but its shadow lingered, a ghost that haunted our town. That spring, my family moved north to the little Lost River Valley, far from those cursed woods. But the fear stayed with me, a weight I carried into adulthood. This encounter frightened me the most, more than any other strange tale from my childhood. I was sure I would have been killed if the giant hadn't broken through the ice. The story of the Idaho wild man became legend whispered in saloons and around campfires. But for me, it was no tale. It was the day I learned the world held terrors beyond imagining. Years later, I found an old journal in my father's attic, written by a trapper from the 1800s. He described a creature just like ours, a shadow in the snow that hunted alone, leaving no trace but fear. Was it the same beast? Or something older? Something that still roams those mountains? I'm an old man now, but those red eyes still haunt my dreams. What was it? A man gone feral? A demon from the deep woods? Or something we'll never understand? If you're ever out in the wilds of Idaho, skating on a frozen river or hiking through the snow, listen for the silence. If the world goes quiet, if the air feels heavy, run. Because some things out there don't just hunt, they claim, and they don't let go. The summer sun was barely creeping over the horizon, painting the farmlands around our Kentucky home in hues of gold and shadow. I was 22, back from college for a few weeks, crashing in the sprawling house my family had called home for years. I'd woken up around 8 in the morning on the living room couch, having fallen asleep the previous night alongside my mom and my older sister Lily, who were still snoring softly beside me. The house sat on an acre of land, surrounded by fields that stretched to the horizon, with only the distant hum of a tractor to break the silence. It felt like the edge of the world, peaceful, isolated, untouchable. I rubbed the sleep from my eyes, craving coffee and the movie I'd left unfinished the night before. My plan was simple: grab breakfast, fire up my laptop, and lose myself in the dining room for a couple of hours. My dog, Max, a scruffy mutt with a knack for sensing trouble, padded after me as I shuffled toward the kitchen. The house was quiet, save for the creak of old floorboards under my feet. But as I stepped into the dining room, a chill prickled my neck. Not the kind from a draft, but the kind that makes you feel like you're not alone. I shook it off, blaming the early hour. Max, though, froze at the threshold. His ears perked, staring into the kitchen with an intensity I'd never seen before. I settled at the dining room table, my laptop humming to life, a bowl of cereal in front of me. The table was right by the kitchen archway, close enough that if I leaned back, I could see the far side of the kitchen where the door to the deck stood. its large window gleaming in the morning light. Max curled up at my feet, his warmth a comfort, until he wasn't. About 45 minutes into my movie, Max shifted, planting himself under the archway, staring into the kitchen with a low growl rumbling in his throat. I paused the movie, frowning. Max wasn't the type to fuss over nothing. A squirrel, maybe? But his hackles were up, his eyes locked on something I couldn't see. I called his name, soft at first, then sharper. He didn't budge. That's when I heard it. A faint shuffling, like nails scratching against wood coming from the kitchen. My pulse quickened. The house was old, sure, but this wasn't the usual groan of settling beams. It was deliberate, rhythmic, like something, or someone, was testing the edges of the deck door. I stood, my chair scraping the floor, and peered into the kitchen. The window blinds were half open, casting slatted shadows across the tiles. Nothing moved, but Max's growl deepened, his body tense as a coiled spring, and the air felt heavier, like the house itself was holding its breath. My heart hammered as I followed Max's gaze to the deck door. Through the blinds I saw it, something pale, almost bald, clinging to the window frame, its eyes glinting like coins in the dim light. It wasn't human, not quite. Its skin was a sickly, pinkish white stretched tight over a skull too small for its frame. It was scratching the screen, a horrible rasping sound, its breath heavy and ragged, like it was desperate to get inside. My mind screamed intruder, but the size, barely 4 feet tall, and the way it moved, jerky and unnatural, said otherwise. Max, who'd bark at a leaf falling, just stood there, frozen, watching it with a stillness that terrified me more than the thing itself. I stumbled back, my legs like jelly, and ran to the living room. I shook my mom awake, my voice a panicked whisper, dragging her to the kitchen. By the time we got there, the window was empty, the blinds swaying slightly as if touched by a breeze. Mom's eyes widened at my trembling, but she saw nothing. We checked the deck, and there was nothing but fingerprints smudged on the window frame. Too small, too distorted to be human. My blood ran cold. Whatever it was had been watching us, maybe for hours, and Max had known. The realization hit like a punch. This wasn't a random prowler. This was something that didn't belong in our world. We scoured the yard, the fields, every inch of that acre, but found nothing. No footprints, no broken branches, just those eerie smudges on the glass. I was traumatized, haunted by the thought that something had been watching me, maybe for hours, and I hadn't even known. Mom tried to calm me, suggesting it was a prank or a wild animal, but her voice wavered. Max, usually a whirlwind of energy, stayed glued to my side, his eyes darting to the windows. That house wasn't our home anymore, not after that. We moved a year later, chasing a fresh start, but the memory clung to me like a shadow. What keeps me up at night isn't just the creature's face, those hollow glinting eyes, or the way it clawed at our door. It's the questions that fester. What was it? Why us? Locals whispered about old farmland legends, things older than the fields, tied to the land itself. I dug into county records once, found stories of unexplained sightings, vanishings, all within miles of our old house. Nothing concrete, but enough to make my skin crawl. I don't live there anymore, but some nights I swear I feel those eyes on me, waiting. And I wonder, did we leave it behind, or did it follow us? Our neighbor, Mrs. Callahan, warned us the day we moved in. That land's got a history, she said, her eyes darting toward our new house, a sprawling farmhouse on the outskirts of Lexington, Kentucky. Things show up, things that don't belong. I'm Emma, 22, a freelance artist who traded city life for this quiet stretch of farmland with my mom and sister Lily. Mrs. Callahan's stories sounded like rural ghost tales, shadows in the fields, whispers at dawn. But the way she clutched her shawl made my skin prickle. She spoke of a visitor that watched from the woods, never staying long, always leaving a mark. I laughed it off, chalking it up to small-town superstition. But the house never felt right after that. The way the wind howled through the cornfields at night, the way the shadows seemed to linger just beyond the porch light, it was like the land was alive, watching us as much as we watched it. The farmhouse was old, its walls stained with time, the deck out back overlooking endless acres of corn and dense forest. It was beautiful in the daylight, with golden fields stretching to the horizon, but at night it felt like the world was holding its breath. My dog, Luna, a border collie with a bark for every leaf that fell, was my shadow. She'd chase squirrels, snap at flies, and howl at the mailman. But lately, she'd been off, staring at the deck window for hours, her tail still, her eyes sharp with a knowing I couldn't decipher. I'd catch her pacing the kitchen at midnight, her nose twitching as if she smelled something I couldn't. I told myself it was just her quirks, but Mrs. Callahan's words gnawed at me. Things that don't belong. That morning, I woke up on the living room couch, having fallen asleep watching a movie the night before. Mom and Lily were sprawled nearby, their soft snores filling the room. The house was still, the early light filtering through the curtains, casting long shadows across the hardwood. I grabbed my laptop and a bowl of cereal, heading to the dining room to finish the film. But Luna's strange behavior stopped me in my tracks. I sat at the end of the table, closest to the kitchen, where I could see the deck if I leaned back. The deck was empty, just a single chair sitting under the window, bathed in the morning sun. But Luna didn't follow her usual routine of begging for scraps. Instead, she planted herself under the archway, staring at the kitchen window by the deck. Her ears were pinned back, her body tense like she was locked onto something invisible. "Luna, come on," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. But she didn't flinch. That's when I heard it, a faint scratching, like claws scraping. Wood. My pulse quickened, the cereal bowl forgotten in my hand. The sound wasn't random, it had a rhythm, slow and deliberate, coming from the deck. Luna's hackles rose, but she didn't bark. A silence that chilled me more than any growl. The air grew heavy, the temperature dropping despite the sunlight streaming through the windows. I stood, my chair scraping the floor, and took a cautious step toward the kitchen. The lights flickered just once, casting a shadow that seemed to twist on its own, curling like smoke before vanishing. Mrs. Callahan's words echoed in my head, louder now. Things that don't belong. Something was out there, and Luna knew it before I did. My heart hammered as I edged into the kitchen, Luna's silent stare pulling me forward. The blinds were half open, revealing the deck window. There, clinging to the frame, was something pale and pinkish, its heavy breathing fogging the glass. Its skin was slick, almost translucent, stretched over a frame too thin to be human. It scratched at the screen, desperate to get in, its long, claw-like nails carving deep grooves in the wood. Its eyes, huge, milky, without pupils, locked onto me, unblinking, gleaming like wet glass in the dim light. I called Luna's name, but she didn't move, transfixed by the thing outside, her body rigid as if under a spell. The creature pressed closer, the glass groaning under its weight. Its breathing was a wet rasp, like air forced through a broken pipe, each exhale clouding the window. I stumbled back, my voice trapped in my throat. It tilted its head, studying me, its face a featureless mask except for those eyes which seemed to see straight through me. The scratching grew frantic, the screen buckling under its claws. I ran to the couch, shaking Mom awake. "There's something outside." We raced back, Luna trailing us, but it was gone, leaving only smudged fingerprints on the frame. The chair on the deck was toppled, as if it had scrambled away in a hurry. Luna finally growled, low and fierce, breaking her eerie silence, her eyes still fixed on the empty window. I thought I was losing my mind, but Luna saw it too. Those fingerprints, too long, too thin, haunted me. Mom checked the deck, finding nothing but the prints. "Could be a prank," she said, but her trembling hands betrayed her doubt. I checked the yard, but there was nothing except those marks, smeared across the frame like a signature. That night, Luna slept pressed against me, her eyes scanning the dark, her body tense. I felt watched, like the thing was still out there, lurking, just beyond the tree line, waiting for its chance. The house, once a sanctuary, felt like a trap, its walls closing in with every creak and groan. I couldn't let it go. I visited Mrs. Callahan the next day, her kitchen warm with the smell of coffee, but her face grew pale when I described the creature. She handed me an old journal, its pages yellowed, written by the house's first owner in the 1940s. It told of a family who vanished without a trace, leaving only strange prints on the deck and a child's shoe, half buried in the dirt. "They angered something," she whispered. "Something older than this land, something that never leaves." I dug deeper, finding articles in the local library about missing hikers, all within a mile of our property, all mentioning pale figures in the woods, eyes that glowed in the dark. The journal called it a watcher, a thing that claimed the land long before humans arrived, waking when the seasons turned. Back home, I noticed more signs, scratches on the deck at night, a cold spot in the kitchen that made Luna whine, a faint whisper in the wind that sounded like my name. Once I found a rusted locket near the deck, its clasp broken, a faded photo inside of a woman who looked too much like Mom. Was the creature tied to the house or to us? Had it been watching since we moved in, or longer? I installed motion sensor lights, but they'd flicker on for no reason, casting shadows that moved when nothing should. Luna became my sentinel, her instincts sharper than any camera. That morning, her silence was a warning louder than any bark, and I trust her now more than ever. If your dog stares into the dark, if the air feels wrong, listen. The things that watch from the shadows are closer than you think, and they're not always gone. When you look again, the basement of our suburban Ohio home was a maze of forgotten junk, a crypt of cobwebs and shadows that always gave me the creeps. I was 15, a lanky kid named Lucas, the last of my siblings still living at home. One Saturday, while dodging chores, I decided to poke around down there, hoping to find something cool among the clutter. Under a pile of moldy boxes, I unearthed a rusted metal tin, its lid scratched with faint angular markings. Inside was a tattered journal, its pages yellowed, filled with spidery handwriting about the watcher in the walls. My pulse quickened. This wasn't just junk. It was a secret. That night, alone in the house, I read the journal by flashlight. It belonged to a man named Harold, a previous owner, who wrote of strange noises and shadows that moved without a source. I'd always felt it too, like I was never truly alone in a room, a nagging sense that eyes were on me, even in the dead of night. The journal's final entry chilled me. It knows I see it. It won't let me leave. I slammed the book shut, my breath shallow. The house creaked, louder than usual, as if responding to my discovery. My dog, Rusty, whined, staring at the basement door. I tried to laugh it off, but the air felt thick, charged with an unseen presence. Something was in this house with me, and it wasn't just my imagination. The journal had woken it, and now it was watching. The days after finding the journal were a descent into paranoia. Whenever I was alone, the house seemed to hum with a life of its own. I started hearing whispers, soft and sharp, like secrets hissed through clenched teeth. Whenever I was by myself, they came from nowhere, slithering into my ears, too faint to understand but heavy with intent. One afternoon, I caught a glimpse of a shadow darting across the hallway. Gone when I turned, no one else home. My heart hammered, the air turning cold where the shadow passed. Rusty growled. His eyes locked on empty space, barking at nothing next to a soccer ball that rolled slowly across the living room floor, as if nudged by an invisible hand. The disturbances grew bolder. One night, the TV remote slid off the coffee table, landing with a clatter while Rusty barked at the air beside it. I froze, my skin prickling as the whispers returned, now louder, like a chorus of knives scraping glass. Then came the footsteps, heavy, deliberate, running toward me from the upstairs hall, even though I was alone. I bolted to the kitchen, slamming the door, but the sound stopped just outside, leaving only silence and my ragged breathing. I checked every room, nothing. The house mocked me, its walls seeming to pulse with a hidden heartbeat. I avoided being alone, but my parents' work schedules left me stranded too often. Each time, the presence grew stronger, as if feeding on my fear. Rusty's barks became frantic, his fur bristling at corners where the light seemed to dim. I started sleeping with the journal, hoping it held answers, but its pages only deepened the mystery, describing a watcher that thrived on solitude. The basement became my refuge and my prison. My parents, tired of my imagination, gave me the biggest room down there, thinking it'd calm me. But the disturbances followed, sharper now. Whenever I forgot to lock the back door to the dog area, a tapping started, soft at first, like fingernails on glass coming from outside. I'd check, heart pounding, but the sound shifted, now coming from the walls or ceiling, stopping only when I locked the door. It was deliberate, a rhythm that felt alive, mocking my carelessness. These things only happened when I was alone, and no one else heard them. Not my parents, not my friends. My sister Mia believed me, saying she'd felt a chill in her old room, but Mom and Dad dismissed it as teenage nonsense. One night, alone again, I sat in the basement, Rusty curled at my feet. The journal lay open, its words blurring in my exhaustion. The whispers returned, now a low growl vibrating through the floor. A shadow flickered in the corner, taller this time, its edges fraying like smoke. I clutched Rusty, who snarled, his eyes fixed on the back door, unlocked. The tapping began, louder, faster, a frantic drumbeat shaking the walls. I scrambled to lock the door, but the shadow lunged, a cold wave washing over me, stealing my breath. I fell, gasping, as the tapping stopped, the shadow gone. Desperate, I tore through the journal. A hidden page tucked in the binding described a tragedy. Harold's daughter, lost in a fire in this house, her spirit trapped, drawn to those alone. The page bore a sketch, a girl's face, eyes hollow, staring. I burned the journal, praying it'd end, but the house stayed heavy. My family didn't believe me, but Mia did, and I clung to that. Weeks later, cleaning the basement, I found a child's shoe under the floorboards, scorched, with the same angular markings as the tin. Was she still here, watching? At night, I hear faint taps, and I wonder if she'll ever let me be alone again. So I was starting out in practice as a healthcare provider, In a private practice had set up cameras to monitor front desk activity outside hallway for security and emergency reasons, as we're in a large metro area with moderate to high crime rates. My name's Nora, a fresh-faced physician assistant in a bustling city clinic, where the hum of fluorescent lights and the click of keyboards were my daily soundtrack. The year was 2018, and I was still finding my footing, navigating the chaos of patient charts and endless appointments. Our clinic was a sleek, modern space, glass walls, digital screens, and a state-of-the-art booking system that promised order in a chaotic world. But beneath the polish, something felt off, like the air held a secret it wasn't ready to share. The neighborhood wasn't the safest. Sirens wailed at night, and the security cameras weren't just for show. They were a necessity. I'd seen my share of odd patients, but I trusted our system, a yellow booking app that tracked every appointment with surgical precision. Or so I thought. That day, the clinic was a whirlwind. Phones ringing, patients shuffling through, the scent of antiseptic sharp in the air. I barely had time to breathe, let alone notice the subtle glitches. A flickering screen, a chart that wouldn't load, a whisper of static from the intercom when no one was speaking. I brushed it off as tech hiccups, the kind you ignore in a busy day. But looking back, those were warnings, signs that reality was starting to fray. By late afternoon, the waiting room had thinned, leaving an eerie quiet that made the clinic feel too big, too empty. I was at my desk, sipping cold coffee, when the booking app pinged with a new request. It was strange. No insurance, no details, just a name and a time. I didn't know it then, but that notification was the first crack in the world I thought I knew. A crack that would widen until it swallowed everything I believed about what was real. The booking app listed the patient as JD, a name that felt oddly incomplete, like a puzzle missing half its pieces. So utilizing a very well-known yellow booking software. Some will know, I received an appointment request. The appointment request had no insurance, listed only a name. It was JD, for short. The appointment is never confirmed via phone, and JD had an international number. JD shows up, and for the most part it was a standard visit, normal workup, etc. Think of it as an unusual physical, but without abnormalities. I noted the international number, a strange country code I didn't recognize but didn't think much of it. Patients sometimes skipped phone confirmations, especially cash payers. When JD walked in, I was struck by their presence. Tall, almost unnaturally so, with a face that seemed too smooth, too unreadable, like a mask that didn't quite fit. They were pretty blunt and short in answering, and again, given the location where the practice was. I was not taken aback by this by any means. I will say, though, that I was confused about the lack of accent. That this individual had seemed pretty standard for the area, yet where they claimed to be from wasn't how they sounded. Their voice was flat, almost mechanical, claiming to be from a distant country, yet their accent was pure local, as if they'd studied the city's cadence but missed the mark. I asked routine questions, job, health history, but their answers were clipped, evasive, like they were reciting lines. Just passing through, they said, eyes locked on mine, unblinking. I felt a chill, not from the air-conditioned room, but from something deeper, something that made my skin crawl. The exam was routine, yet wrong. JD's vitals were perfect, too perfect, like a textbook come to life. No scars, no quirks, nothing to mark them as human. As they left, paying in crisp cash, I caught a glimpse of their shadow on the wall. It flickered just for a second, like it wasn't tethered to their body. I shook it off, blaming the long day, but the unease lingered, a splinter in my mind. The clinic felt smaller after they left, the walls closer, the camera's red lights blinking like eyes. I didn't know it yet, but JD wasn't just a patient. They were a glitch, a tear in the fabric of reality that was about to unravel everything. The day had been a blur, but as evening settled, I sat down to finish my notes. The day was pretty. Busy though, so I wasn't able to do the note then and there. And so at the end of the day, I sat down to do my notes. I noticed that JD was not in the note tally, meaning that there was one patient missing from the total. So I might check the system. Thinking that the FD might have, forgotten since it's a cash note, I refreshed the system expecting JD's file to pop up, but it was gone. No record, no trace, like they'd never existed. My stomach dropped. I checked the booking app. Nothing. Not a single entry for JD, not even a glitch to explain it. I asked the front desk what happened, and they said that they didn't know what or who I was referring to. Now, we had seen over 50 people collectively that day, so obviously I just let it slide. I did the note, but did not add any info other than the one told me by the patient. And I made note of the international number but couldn't remember the code, but flash forward to maybe 2 or 3 days later. I was still thinking about the situation and remembered the cameras, so I told the front desk to look at the video with me. I just needed to know that I wasn't crazy. And to my astonishment, there, clear as day, is the patient talking to me in the hallway and checking out in the FD, with the FD writing the transaction on both the cash ledger and the digital ledger. My colleague Alex stared at the screen, his face pale. There was JD, tall and unyielding, speaking to me, paying at the desk. The footage was undeniable, yet the system swore they were a ghost. Needless to say, all three of us weren't still, or very confused by this. I replayed the video, my heart racing. JD's movements were too smooth, their shadow flickering again, like a bad render in a video game. The air in the clinic grew heavy. The cameras hummed louder, as if they were watching us back. Reality felt like it was bending, twisting, and I was caught in the fold, questioning everything I'd seen, everything I'd believed. That night, I couldn't sleep. JD's unblinking eyes haunting me, their shadow flickering in my mind. Needless to say, all three of us weren't still, are very confused by this. I kept replaying the footage, searching for answers, but it only deepened the mystery. The clinic felt different after that. Screens glitched more often, doors creaked when no one was there, and the camera's red lights seemed to follow me. Alex and I stopped talking about JD, but the silence was louder than words. A shared fear that reality wasn't as solid as we thought. I started questioning everything. Was JD a glitch in the system, a hacker's prank, or something else? Something that slipped through the cracks of our world? The international number, the perfect vitals, the shadow that didn't belong. They didn't add up. I dug deeper, checking old records, but found nothing. Rumors swirled among the staff. A patient who appeared and vanished years ago. A figure caught on camera but never logged. Was JD one of them? A visitor from somewhere beyond, testing the edges of our reality? Or was the clinic itself a trap, a place where the veil between worlds was thin? That experience rewired me. I double-checked every appointment, watched the cameras like a hawk, but the fear lingered. Fear that reality could unravel again. That JD wasn't gone, just waiting. If you've ever worked somewhere that felt wrong, where the systems lied and the air held secrets, you know what I mean. If a name appears on your screen, untraceable, unconfirmed, think twice before you let them in. They might not be what they seem, and some visitors don't leave. They rewrite your world. Have you ever seen something that shouldn't exist? A glitch that made you question reality? Share your story below, because the truth is out there, hiding in the code. And trust me, you don't want to meet it alone. You know that moment when the world feels just a little too perfect, like the universe is setting you up for a fall? That's how it was that day in the supermarket. The fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, the air thick with the scent of fresh produce and canned promises. I was in the fruit or veggie sections of Fred's, pushing a cart with my daughter Lily strapped in, her tiny hands waving at the world. She was almost 1, all giggles and wide eyes, and it'd have been a normal day. Some people waved at her, some smiled. A few others sent kind words away. My daughter was enjoying interacting with passerbyers as she normally did, and I couldn't help but smile, basking in her light. I'm Sarah, a new mom, and Lily was my everything, my heart, outside my body, but something was off. The supermarket was crowded, carts clanging, voices overlapping, yet I felt oddly alone, like a spotlight was trained on us. I brushed it off, chalking it up to mom instincts on overdrive. Then I saw him. A man, maybe late 30s, lanky with a too-tight jacket lingering at the edge of the produce aisle. His eyes weren't on the apples or the carrots, they were on Lily. He wasn't smiling, not exactly, but his lips twitched, like he was practicing one. I tightened my grip on the cart, my pulse quickening. Out of nowhere, a man was following us, his steps slow but deliberate, matching our pace. I told myself he was just shopping, but deep down, I knew better. His presence felt like a shadow, cold and heavy, trailing us through the aisles. I turned down the canned goods aisle, hoping to lose him in the crowd, but he was there, a few steps behind, his gaze fixed on my daughter. He started making silly faces at my child, exaggerated grimaces that made Lily giggle but sent a chill through me. He was waving frantically at my child, his hands moving too fast, too eager. My stomach twisted. This wasn't harmless, this was something else, something wrong. I glanced at his hands. No cart, no basket, nothing. I noticed that he wasn't actually purchasing anything, just drifting, always just close enough to keep us in sight. My mom instinct screamed, "Get out, now!" But I was frozen, caught between fear and the need to protect my little girl. My heart was hammering now, each beat screaming at me to move, to protect Lily. I kept changing my direction to shake him off, weaving through the aisles, my cart rattling as I dodged shoppers. But he was relentless, a shadow that clung to us no matter how fast I moved. I'd turn a corner, thinking I'd lost him, only to see him again, lurking at the end of an aisle, still making faces and waving at my child. His gestures were frantic, almost desperate, and Lily's giggles started to fade, her little face creasing with confusion. That's when I knew. This wasn't a game. This was a predator circling his prey. I pushed the cart toward the bakery, my mind racing. Who was he? Why Lily? The supermarket felt like a maze, the bright lights mocking my panic. I glanced back, and there he was, closer now, his eyes locked on my daughter with an intensity that made my skin crawl. His jacket was open, revealing a crumpled piece of paper tucked in his pocket, too small to read, but it looked like a photo, its edges worn. My stomach dropped. Was it a picture of a child? Of my child? The thought hit me like a freight train, and I couldn't breathe. I had to get us out, but I couldn't let him follow us to the car, to our home. I spotted a store employee stocking shelves and made a beeline for her, my voice shaking as I whispered, "There's a man following me, and my daughter. Please help." Her eyes widened and she nodded, grabbing her radio. I pointed out the man, and the employee seemed to recognize my fear. When I pointed him out to the employee, he took off running and was gone, vanishing into the crowd like a ghost. But I wasn't relieved. His sudden flight only deepened my fear. He knew he'd been caught, but what had he been planning? I stood there, clutching Lily, her warmth the only thing grounding me. The employee stayed with us, her presence a lifeline, but my mind was spiraling. Had he been watching us before today? Had he been to this store before, waiting for the right moment? The crumpled paper in his pocket haunted me, a clue to a puzzle I was terrified to solve. I asked the employee if she'd seen him before. She hesitated, then admitted he'd been in the store a few times, always alone, always lingering near families. My blood ran cold. This wasn't a one-off. This was a pattern. I thanked her, my voice barely a whisper, and held Lily tighter. Her tiny heartbeat a reminder of what I'd almost lost. But even as we stayed safe in the store, I knew this wasn't over. He'd run. But predators don't just disappear. They regroup. The rest of that day was a blur, my hands trembling as I buckled Lily into her car seat, scanning the parking lot for any sign of him. I was left rattled and kept thinking about my daughter's safety. I drove home, with the doors locked, checking my rear-view mirror every few seconds, half expecting to see his face in the shadows. At home, I couldn't relax. Every creak of the house, every flicker of light, felt like a warning. I kept wondering what he wanted, that crumpled paper in his pocket burning in my mind. Was he a drifter with a twisted obsession? A father who'd lost a child and saw Lily as a replacement? Or something worse, something I couldn't even name? I called the store the next day, desperate for answers. The manager confirmed they'd reviewed the security footage. The man had been in the store multiple times over the past month, always near the produce section, always watching families with young children. They'd banned him, but he'd used different names at checkout, none traceable. My heart sank. He wasn't just a creep. He was calculated, slippery, a ghost in the system. I filed a police report, but without a clear ID, they could only promise to keep an eye out. That wasn't enough. I started researching, digging into local news, missing children cases, anything that might explain him. I found nothing concrete, but the stories of strangers targeting kids in public places piled up, each one tightening the knot in my stomach. Then, a week later, it happened again. I was at a park with Lily, pushing her on a swing, when I felt, to me, that same prick of dread. I looked up and there he was, across the street, half hidden by a tree, watching us. No silly faces this time, just a cold, unblinking stare. That same crumpled paper in his hand. My blood froze. I grabbed Lily and ran to the car, my heart pounding as I sped away. He didn't follow, but he didn't need to. He'd found us again, and that was enough to shatter any sense of safety I had left. I've moved since then to a new town, a new life, but the fear lingers. I check the locks twice, avoid crowded places, and keep Lily close, always. That paper, those eyes, the way he vanished. They're scars on my soul, a reminder that danger can hide in plain sight. What did he want with my daughter, and why was he acting so bizarrely? I may never know, but I know this. Trust your gut. If something feels wrong, it probably is. And if you're a parent, hold your kids tight, because the world is full of shadows, and some of them are watching. The summer of 2009 was one I'd never forget, etched into my memory like a scar. I was 16, a city kid from San Francisco, shipped off to a deaf camp in Mariposa County, California, nestled deep in the Sierra Nevada mountains. It was a deaf camp, late July, where the woods swallowed the sunlight by 6 p.m., plunging the camp into an eerie twilight. The camp was a patchwork of rustic cabins, boys and girls separated, each a wooden lodge propped on stilts, wrapped in mosquito mesh, with a single doorway to the outside world. My cabin number 7 housed 10 of us. overseen by 3 counselors who were more like older siblings than strict wardens. I'd always been curious, the kind of kid who'd poke at shadows to see what lurked within. The boys' cabins were rugged, open to the elements, with windows circling the entire structure. That first night, as I lay on my bunk, the forest whispered secrets through the mesh. Crickets, owls, and something else. A low hum that didn't belong. I chalked it up to nerves. But my gut told me this place held more than summer memories. By day, we hiked, swam, and signed stories under the sun. By night, the camp transformed, the darkness pressing against the cabins like a living thing, daring to look closer. A few nights into camp, the routine of ghost stories and s'mores gave way to something stranger. I was restless, staring out the mesh window of our cabin when I saw it. A flicker of light in the distance, like fireflies trapped all in a jar. One night I noticed an unused cabin off in the distance, dancing with white and blue lights from the inside. It wasn't a flashlight's beam or a lantern's glow. These lights swirled and pulsed, playful yet unnatural, as if the cabin itself was alive. I blinked, thinking my eyes were playing tricks, but the glow persisted, hypnotic and wrong. I nudged Ethan, my bunkmate, and signed, "You seeing this?" His eyes widened, and soon the whole cabin was buzzing. I yelled out, waving to get everyone's attention, and our counselors craned their necks to see what we were all staring at. The lights didn't stop. They twirled faster, casting eerie shadows through the trees. Other cabins caught on, campers spilling out to gather under a lamppost, signing frantically. The counselors huddled, their faces tight with confusion. Was it a prank? A trespasser? But the cabin was locked, abandoned for years, its windows boarded up. The air grew heavy. The forest's whispers, now a low growl, and I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain breeze. The counselors decided to investigate, pairing off with flashlights, their beams slicing through the darkness. A few staff ventured toward the cabin while we watched from the lamppost, the lights still swirling inside until they abruptly stopped. The silence that followed was deafening, the forest holding its breath. We waited, hearts pounding as the flashlight beams bobbed closer to the abandoned cabin. Then chaos erupted. One counselor, a 6-foot-tall guy named Mike, came sprinting back, signing frantically that he'd seen something. Twice his size, white-gray, moving so fast it wasn't human. His face was ashen, his hands trembling as he described a featureless blur. No face, just a mass of limbs that vanished into the woods. Panic swept through the campers. We were freaking out. Nobody sleeping that night. Some signed about aliens, others about ghosts. But Mike's story stuck with me. Something massive, unnatural, lurking just beyond our sight. The counselors regrouped, their search abandoned, and ushered us back to our cabins. I kept replaying Mike's words. It wasn't human. As I lay in my bunk, the mesh windows felt like paper, useless against whatever was out there. Every rustle of leaves sounded like footsteps, every snap of a twig like a warning. The camp, once a haven, now felt like a trap. And I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever Mike saw was still watching us. The next morning, the camp directors gathered us in the mess hall, their faces grim. They told us we could no longer go outside after dinner, citing safety concerns and possible trespassers. But those of us who'd seen the lights knew it wasn't that simple. Nothing happened again after that night, but the strangeness of it all puzzled me. The camp resumed its routine. Hikes, games, laughter, but the magic was gone. I kept my eyes on the woods, half expecting those lights to flare up again, or worse, to see that gray-white thing staring back. Years later, now 32, I've scoured forums, old articles, anything about Mariposa County. I'm still puzzled thinking about it often. Locals talk of night crawlers, spindly creatures caught on grainy footage, or older tales of spirits tied to the land's gold rush days. Nothing explains what we saw. That night is burned into my memory, a mystery I'll never solve. Did we stumble into something ancient? Something that didn't want us there? Or was it just a trick of the mind amplified by fear? I don't know. But every time I'm in the woods, I feel it. A prickle on my neck, a whisper in the dark, asking if I'm ready to see it again. "15 stories. 15 doors you've willingly walked through, and now that you're here, maybe you've started to notice. The room doesn't feel quite the same anymore. Maybe the air is colder, the shadows a bit deeper. Maybe you feel like something's watching, just out of view. You've invited these tales into your mind, but some stories don't leave when the video ends. They stay, they wait, and when the timing is right, they follow. But this was only the beginning. The next chapter holds what even this video couldn't contain. Stories too dangerous, too cursed, too real to be ignored. So if you think you're ready for more, subscribe. Because the next time we meet, you won't be listening to stories anymore. You'll be living one.